with Estefania.
Oh,
Have you
fantastic.
seen it? So it's kind of keeping that.
Yeah, I got some thumbs up.
Oh, we're streaming live on YouTube. That's so scary.
Yes, we are now streaming live.
Hello world.
So
Hello.
Thank you for agreeing to do this. I'm going to hand over because it's Carolyn's show today. But it's really great for you to come speak to us. And hello, everybody, all the students, and hello, everybody on YouTube. Over to Carolyn.
Thanks, Clive. Yes, so I'm Carolyn. For those of you who don't know me, who are watching online YouTube, I am the Programme Manager and Tutor on the Royal College of Art MA Service Design Programme. And our practitioner talks, just for those of you who don't know, are really organised. They're lunchtime events that we've put on where we invite our guests in to talk about service design in action, no matter their role or their context. And it's really to give our students the insight into professional practice that they will be entering into very, very soon after leaving us, as well as those of you that might not be, part of our programme or the Royal College of Art, to sort of align it to, your own professional practice. So it's just giving that insight into what service design is. And we're really delighted to welcome Estefania to us today. She is one of our own, graduated 3 years ago now. And she came to us with some experience and from a visual communications background. And she's taken that with her onto Boston Consulting Group Digital Ventures in Berlin, where she's a lead experience designer and using service design to help create some really exciting new startups. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, Estefania, and we'll leave plenty of room at the end for questions and a conversation for certain things that people want to know more about. So thank you again.
Thank you for the invitation. It's such a pleasure and it's such an honor to be back talking with you. And I love this connection of being an alumni, but I'm always seeing what you are doing, what was the show this year. And I love this knowledge sharing. So I'm super happy to be here after 3 years, as you said. I guess you can see my screen, right?
Perfect, yes.
Yes, so thank you to the person who made the poster. I didn't have a cover, so it was really nice. And so we had some conversations with Caroline about what could this interview be about. And I think we talk about many topics. So the way I thought we can structure it, but it's still like a proposal, depending on kind of what students would like to talk about, is tell you a little bit about my design journey and why I ended up at the RCA, and how those 2 years of the program really influenced my current practice at the Boston Consulting Group, Digital Ventures. And then tell you a bit about my role today, kind of, although my role is not called service designer, I still do see my practice as a service designer. And yeah, the type of work that we do there, and then kind of close the circle back with some reflections on kind of how I think some of the things I've seen now might influence the work that you're doing. And ideally, that would be maybe kind of half of the time. And then I will be very keen on hearing if anyone has questions, and then keep it casual if you have any topic that you would like to deep dive. So that's my proposal for now. And I would like to tell you first a bit about me. I am from Santiago de Chile originally. I was born there. Most of my family is still there. And my design journey started in 2004 when I decided to study graphic design in Valparaíso. That's a city in the coast side of Chile. I always wanted to be a designer, and I've always loved graphics, and I thought about I wanted to do posters and flyers and this kind of stuff. That's kind of how I saw myself. And in Chile, you do study like 4 or 5 years design. That's kind of how long the bachelor is. During my studies, like doing anything digital was almost non-existent until the end of it, that I graduated with a professor who had experience in interaction design. And it was the first time I heard oh, you as a designer, you can speak with people, and doing ethnographics and all these things that kind of came almost as a surprise to me, that's kind of that there are different methodologies that you can use to do design that are maybe not so tangible. So that was something I was quite attracted to. And after this period, I started working for an agency. I moved to Santiago, and I worked for a digital agency where we did like a lot of like web design, and I started doing interface design for the first time. So I saw it like a nice mix because I knew graphic design, so it was just doing like the digital version of it. But then I learned that we could also do that there are like some methods that you can use and that you can track also to see success. And so we did a lot of like interviews and also eye tracking and all of these things that were kind of new to me. So it was a lot of like in practice learning for me, because I really didn't even know how to use like computer software and these kind of things. After that period, I also became a freelance. I had already like some clients. So I saw myself as a UI designer, really. And in 2011, I moved to Berlin, and I started working for a startup, which was again kind of a shift for me, because it's an e-learning startup, so for within education. And I thought it was quite interesting because you have like one product, one design system, but you iterate on top of it. So the role of a designer was kind of different in the sense that you're always looking for to optimize and to think about retention, and it's a kind of a different way of really. And we also did like design sprints and working agile. So I got a lot of like knowledge during that period, but I saw myself really still focused in the product in itself. So I could innovate, but I became increasingly more interested in design strategy. And actually during that period, I never really spoke with users. Like we didn't have that approach. And I think then I made one of the best decisions I've made professionally in my life, that was moving to London and when I applied to the RCA, because I felt like that maybe having these kind of 2 full years to study and to gain practice, and this idea of like studio based, I thought it was really attractive to what I wanted to do at the moment. So during that period, I will tell you a bit later in the presentation about some of the work that I did, but it was quite inspirational, and it provided me a lot of tools to then move to my current role, that is within design consulting. I mean, I've never knew anything about consulting, and I thought that maybe this presentation I will tell you a bit about my practice and what does it mean to work as a service designer when you work with large corporations, and in the world of consulting, that it's something that already has a large history of how do you approach things. So that's sort of my journey. And I think I think I've seen this many times. It's a journey that comes from this sort of very kind of graphic visual point of view to moving into more abstract spaces of design. And I really like this sort of graphic of the 4 orders of design, of like cubes that are inside other cubes, because I see, for me at least, it's something that you build upon. And it's not like I'm changing roles and I'm doing a little bit here or a bit there, but it's sort of everything kind of correlated. And I hope that I will be able to exemplify it later in this presentation. So in 2015, I started at the Royal College of Art. As Caroline said, I think I was the 3rd year there. And during that period, I was looking for diversity. I had a lot of experience already working for startups and working kind of for small corporate clients. And one of the things that I was focusing on was trying to do a lot of like public sector work that I think I didn't have experience so much there, and just doing different things from museums to healthcare, working for a school, working for the Shore Trust, that is like a UK charity, for Lambeth Council. And I also, while doing that, I also took some side projects. So at the beginning, I thought about like doing kind of one thing and trying to specialize. But actually, one piece of advice from Nick at the time was to try to diversify, because indeed you can learn a lot from the private world to the public one and the other way around. So my take there was kind of to be exposed to as many like learning experiences as possible. And one of the experiences that is kind of very dear to my heart, because of how much learning I had from that, was my final project that was done in collaboration with the innovation unit of the new North Zealand hospital, that it's in the north of Denmark. I did this with Mariepi, who is the person in the middle. She was, at the time I was graduating, she was doing her PhD in service design, and she's a doctor. So she's a medical practitioner. So we team up to work with this hospital, which is, there was this innovation unit that they were thinking about like different technologies and all the capabilities that this new North Zealand hospital will have, which is a hospital that is still under construction. These are some of the render pictures. So it was quite an exciting space, and actually it was the first project from my entire learning experience at the RCA that I took a more vision, like more, it was like a vision service design project. So we were not looking to implement solutions, but just kind of think big and kind of provide some lights of kind of how they can scope some of the ideas that this hospital wanted to implement. So to do that, it was we had to, of course, think of like all the dynamics of kind of where does this hospital sit within the entire Danish healthcare system, what is the role of the municipality, how primary and secondary health works, how are the payment systems, and like this big picture that is kind of quite natural for service designers. Also from a technology point of view, kind of what the big question was kind of what is the role of the hospital in this space when you have like all these players providing different types of healthcare solutions. What is the role of the hospital here? Is it about orchestrating? And there were all these sort of big questions there. And we also wanted to, the way we also scoped it was, let's think about kind of the future, different futures that might have. So we thought about like a service that could be in 2025. And our solution was like not what is very likely to happen, but could happen. So it was kind of a rather optimistic point of view. And you might think, okay, that's still kind of high level. How do you really work with this? And the way we kind of our main lens, you could say, was thinking about COPD patients who were those with the highest hospitalization rates there, so the most expensive for the system, basically. So by using this very specific kind of target user, you could say, and these very specific needs, we can kind of connect to that kind of future vision. So that's sort of how we scoped it. And we definitely, we spoke with many users, many kind of patients and people in the hospitals. And that's kind of, I think the beauty of it was doing it very kind of bottom up. So we knew a lot about like the high level things I already mentioned, but then, okay, how things are actually experienced in the practice for this very specific segment. And I think there's more, but I'm aware of time, so I'm not gonna kind of touch so much on my final project, but I think I would like to share some of the things that to me stay with me from the entire experience of being at the RCA. So I think there are many, but I try to summarize them in 5. I think the first one is like an outstanding mix of theory and practice. I think having done so many projects and so many interviews and so many workshops and so many things, provided me with the confidence to kind of go to the next step. And until today, when I'm confronted by a new project, many times I do think about some things that I did at the RCA, which I find quite inspiring still. The second one is dealing with uncertainty and trusting the process. I think from my design practice before doing service design, things were much more scoped or kind of more saved, because maybe the design briefs that I was dealing with were kind of more like they were already like in a sandbox. Whereas with service design, sometimes you're confronted by big problems, or you don't know anything. Like, what did I know about like healthcare in Denmark? Very little, or healthcare or COPD. And I think you sometimes get this sort of anxiety of like, what do I do here? I'm not an expert, but I think I kind of learned to trust the process, and you have the double diamond, and this is kind of, you will find out eventually. And that's something that happens and again, but you kind of build this this intuition already that you will know at some point while doing it. The third one is storytelling and how to distill information to share back, which is fundamental also in the consulting world. Well, you know, you're all students, and probably you're currently already thinking about like presentations that you will have to present. I thought it was something more from the RCA, really, like, because you have the tutors and you're being evaluated. So we come up with a deck and we tell the story. But actually, at least in my practice, that's something I do very, very often. And I think I learned a lot about kind of saying kind of what are the key takeaways and what is the message and what do you actually want to get from presenting, kind of. Yeah. Then number 4 is giving and receiving feedback. Maybe some of you have experienced it, but also being at uni again, you're quite exposed, like you're showing your work and you get some comments, and that's something that will continue happening. And I think it's really healthy as a designer and as a professional to get used to how to do it and to improve and do that like on the spot, and making that kind of part of your working practice. And number 5 is the importance of knowledge sharing and the network. I think that's something that I also saw quite more often in the UK in comparison to Germany. Building a network, talking with people. If you know something, you share it, and create opportunities like the one I'm having now to connect. That's something that really stay with me, and that I continuously do also at work and with other designers and people that I've known along my journey. So that's sort of introduction until like my time at the RCA. And as mentioned, I think I learned a lot about like desirability and everything that has to do with the users. But normally you find innovation almost at the intersection of desirability, but also viability and feasibility. So I was quite keen for my next sort of career step of finding a place where I could find like stronger capabilities and teammates who could also tackle these other 2 missing circles for me. And that's how I ended at the Boston Consulting Group, Digital Ventures, which in a nutshell, like you have the BCG, who is like our kind of mother company. They are the ones that historically have worked with corporates, and they do have many sub companies. One of them is BCG Digital Ventures, who work more kind of within the startup world or doing like venture investment. The world of digital business transformation is quite big and is quite competitive at the moment. So you probably know, like there's BCG, there's McKinsey, there's Accenture, there are many other players there. And every time this is more required by different clients and big corporates that need to innovate, and that they might not be disruptive enough in their approach. In a nutshell, what we do is we build and transform businesses. That's what we do. And I think that's the key differentiator to kind of classic consulting, is that we do not only say, well, this is like an opportunity or something that can be done in digital, but we also do it. And we move to kind of the MVP version of that. So it's almost like an end-to-end shop. We're not as big as BCG, of course, but we're still located in different centers around the globe. One of the biggest ones is the one in Berlin, where I am. And what we look is basically at these three lenses. So that's where we see venture opportunities. But we also look at the strategic fit, that is almost like this invisible like circle that surrounds the other three. Because we do not want to see only if an idea, if a concept is desired, viable, and feasible, but we also want to see this sort of the strategic fit. Is this the right moment to do this type of venture? Do we have the assets? What are our unfair advantages? And even what are kind of the invisible, I think, Jura last week, I was seeing his talk, he was mentioning about like the unmentioned desires from the people that you're working with. And I think that also has a critical role when you want to innovate. So that's also a factor that you take into account. And in terms of approach, like if you put it almost in a timeline, we work with three different stages. So the first one is innovation. That is like the beginning of so we have a corporate partner who is interested in investing in a different practice area that they think might be very strategic for them, but they don't know exactly how, and they don't work agile, they don't know how to pivot. This is not kind of their space. So they go to us and they tell us, well, we think there's something around building, I don't know, scooters, and we could do this and that, but it's still very high level. And what we do is that we do the research, we leverage a lot of like the service design methods that you know already, and reimagine different businesses that can be done for them. If we get a go, then we move to incubation, where we do the minimum viable product. So then we prototype and we quickly do kind of how this might look and feel, and kind of what are the first steps to approach that vision. And the third one is commercialization, which is when it's launching, basically. When the product is out there, how do you keep it running? How do you make it grow? And in this way, I think, and the reason I mentioned the project I did with the hospital in Denmark is that, to me, it was, I think that approach is quite similar to many of the things that we do internally at DB, because we think about the present, then we kind of think about the preferred reality in the future. Maybe it's not like how near future is still depending on the scope, but it could be a solution in 3 years, for example. And then from that future, then we define what would be the minimum viable product, and we kind of contrast those times from there. And in reality, this is not the best picture, but I think it's quite realistic. Like, this is kind of how work looks like. That was a messy afternoon, where I think it was right after the kickoff of one of the projects that we had at DB. And what I like about this picture is that everyone there, they're all different in terms, like the one standing up is a designer, then there's one a product manager, the other guy knows about business, the other one is an engineer, the other one knows about growth. And in one room, you have all these different kind of minds thinking about kind of what is our hypothesis of, in this case, we were kind of trying to draft like a high level user journey. And I think the reason why I really like this type of job is that we have all these different roles that we all work together to come up with this sort of business strategy. So the venture architects are kind of the ones that might be more similar to kind of BCG consultants. So those that know about the business, they establish like the business model, all the legal requirements. They might come up with a first version of the go-to-market plan, and they also kind of hold many times strong relationships with the partners. Then the product managers are those that kind of have a clear vision of like what an MVP could be, and the roadmap and the tasks, and kind of they're kind of the glue in terms of like product between different profiles. Then we have venture operations, that they are not client facing, but it's all this machine behind the people that are client facing that support this to happen, from recruiting to executive assistants, IT, etc. And then this is the part is like maybe more relevant for you, that is like the strategic designers, that we do like what would be the most similar to service design at the moment, and experience designers, which is my cohort. So there's still like I'll explain that later, but basically the combination of strategic and experience designer would be kind of what is seen as a service designer if you put it an umbrella over it. Then we have engineers. And finally, we have growth architects, that are those when we launch already, they think about how to grow these different ventures. So as I just mentioned, like almost if you kind of want to make an approximation of service design to the roles that we have, it's almost like strategic designers are stronger in the first diamond, so almost like before the problem statement, and experienced designers work a bit more in the kind of prototyping and coming up with a first version of an MVP. So in practice, a venture setup is like, imagine like you have different people in each one of these roles. So when a client comes and we decide to do, we start a venture, then different people from different cohorts are kind of cherry picked depending on kind of what needs to be done at that specific moment. So me as a designer, I do work with a couple of designers, but I normally work with people with different backgrounds. So a venture setup looks more or less like this. So we're different roles together. So from the cohorts just mentioned, but also with different levels of expertise. Then the GM in the middle would be the general manager. You sometimes have some BCG embeds experts. And then what we try to do is not that we try, but it's a mandatory thing, is from the corporate partner, we have some of the experts as a part of the team. So we don't, it's not like we do the ventures in isolation, but we try to leverage, of course, all the capabilities of our clients, and we're all a team, regardless if you're BCG or DV or corporate partner, and many times there are even more players, even other consultants, if I dare to say. So to bring it to illustrate what I just mentioned a bit more, one of the projects that I've been for the longest time like staffed since I work at BCG DV is this was for a year and a half. I work for the Deutsche Bahn in Germany, which is this really big. They are the owners of the trains, and they have like they're really important because they're the largest percentage is owned by government, and they were kind of almost like the hospital was thinking kind of what is our role here orchestrating healthcare. They were also kind of wondering what is our role in orchestrating mobility in Germany when you have all these Googles and all these other players here, and we see our digital solutions and they're not really up to date. and they wanted to do an ecosystem. And what we did was, when I started there, I think we were not more than 30 people. And we had this idea of doing, this was like a B2B2C solution. So the concept was creating different building blocks or different technologies that will go kind of underneath different mobility apps that could be used by different cities and different mobility providers in Germany. So we started there, and we had to define kind of what is the overarching strategy, but also what are the different, when are we launching, all the specific things about the product. But more importantly, we're designing a company that didn't exist before. And this is the critical part of kind of what we do. Maybe I should have mentioned that at the beginning, because the reason we're not kind of BCG is that we also don't want to work within, it's really, really difficult to innovate when you're really embedded in large corporations, because they have their way of doing things. They might not have the capabilities, and it's just really difficult to be quick and pivot and kind of drive change within this. So that's why we do ventures, and we do things that can be done kind of in parallel. And you can try and fail and try again. And this is sort of when we did this company that is called Movimio, that was the idea of like, we think this is kind of the layout of how we think things could go, but then reality happens. And as I had in this other graphic, you have different types of futures and you never know. So when creating the company, one of the kind of important things was to, at some point this grew and we became bigger to the point that then we had our own office and we created our brand. And my role there lasted until I hired someone who took my role. And that's kind of where it ends. So it has to do also with finding the right capabilities for the startup to run alone and successfully, ideally. So you create creating a company is not kind of the legal requirements to do that, but you create the culture and, I said, like the jobs, and how do you make sure that this is sort of fulfilling the hopes and dreams that were defined for this company at the beginning. I left this like a year and a half ago, and I think they grew already like to 100 people, which is quite impressive. And now they bought Movell, who is like a different company in Germany who also does mobility. So now they're like 170 people, and it's like, it's quite impressive to see things kind of happening at scale. And I think I just wanted to kind of stop a bit, and maybe some of you are wondering, okay, big companies and the roles, but what are designers really doing in this context? And showing, I took again like the first slide that I had, and I deconstructed it into kind of different roles or different things I've done during my design journey. And I think there are many. And if you do graphic design, or you do interface design or interaction design or service design, the type of challenges that you will get are very different, but also the type of decisions that you need to take are also very different. And very honestly, to me, is I do them all in a way depending on what you're doing. So it's not like, oh, I'm a service designer, I just organize, and I'm not working on these other kind of more specific spaces. But I think everything is sort of correlated, and depending on the needs of a different project, I will still have to deal with different layers of challenges, some tangible, some less tangible, but it's, to me, still something that it's very present and still relevant. This is, I made it blurry on purpose because I didn't know if I had the permission to take this, but I wanted to show you this sort of big picture of This is a list from left to right of different kind of project phases that one have, and different outputs that a designer could create. That was just to kind of drive clarity. And I think what is really outstanding for me is that there's so many things that could be expected from a designer. So many, from A/B testing to prototyping to doing a vision video to doing, and maybe many of you already experienced that by doing at the RCA, like the gradient of options that one might take is so big. And I think that's the reason also why we specifically at DV also kind of have strategic and experienced design separate, because at least you can have a kind of clearer idea of what are the different types of expertise that these people might have, and what you want to do at the end is staff people that could be an expert in what needs to be done at a specific stage of the project. So just to finish my presentation, my proposed agenda, I have like some one-pagers with some reflections that I have now working in this type of environment that might be relevant to some of you. And I think the first one is, I don't know where I read this, but I thought it was, it really resonated with me. To have strong opinions and hold them loosely. I think when you're a designer, I think we scan so many options, and sometimes you need to take paths, right? But you don't know exactly if one might work, the other might work. And I think this hesitation is sort of part of the nature that we do. Even if I design something graphic and I'm like, oh, it's more orange, no, it's a bit more red. And you're doing this sort of vacillation all the time. And when you work, at least in my type of job that is in consulting, you need to have strong opinions. First, because the type of people that are around are quite confident. You have loud voices. If people coming from business, people coming C-level partners, like the people that are around your table or your Zoom today, are really confident, even if they don't know much. And I think designers need to be at this stage very kind of clear on what you think the path is, even if it's not, even if that might change. And that's what I mean with hold them loosely. Like this is your stand, and this is kind of your clear communication of what needs to be done. But then if things change, if things pivot, if someone comes with a better idea, then it's okay to leave that aside and kind of jump to the next idea. Secondly, and I think this is kind of the unmentioned things of design that has to do kind of with you as an individual and your practice, is to define, or constantly be defining who you are, what you like, and why you do what you do. This is important because, as I show you, there's so many things that a designer could do, and that you're going to be kind of jumping from one task to the next. And that I think it's important to have some clarity on what is there for you. Kind of, what do you like of doing this? Is it about learning? Is it about connecting with people? Is it about something different? And I think professionally, it's really important to have that sort of North Star. Like, even one of the first things I did when I joined DV was they made us do some, they're called the Gallup Strength Finder. I think it's like a test that says that every individual has like 40 strengths, but they're just ordered in a different way. So the idea is that you focus on your 5 top strengths instead of the things that you're not so good at, and then kind of seeing how do you connect that into the work that you do, so you play to your kind of the things that you do the best and that you also naturally like doing the most. Third is to feel comfortable being a hybrid. Sometimes they always say like, oh, you need to be very, very good at a very specific thing. To me, in my type of work, you do, Of course, you need to be the kind of go-to person for certain activities, but overall, I think it's really, really necessary to be able to navigate different waters and change depending on if you're working for a different practice area with different people. If you maybe you're really good designing screens, but then at some point you will have to test them, and I think it's still important that you know how to talk to users, or maybe come up with a workshop to get some ideas from the client or anything. So, and probably many of you are already hybrids, because probably you all have different backgrounds before doing service design. So I think that's a really big advantage. In my case, it's of course like graphic design, so that's something I kind of also try to leverage in my daily practice. Another thought is to invest time in getting to know the people you're working with. To me, that's a crucial one. We're changing, as I showed you, like the different teams. That might be every 3 months or every month, or maybe I'm engaging in a new project for 2 weeks. And it's not only about being more effective and knowing kind of the underpinning needs and desire that different people might have within the team and also with the client, but also to make the work more fun and more pleasurable. I think it's important that you feel that the people you're working with, that you can trust, and kind of what they're trying to achieve, to make your experience also nicer. So not only focusing on the kind of key users and the people you're designing with, but also the people around you. This one is about communicating the role of design and methodology up front. I think, although we do, so I think the tricky thing about design is that we provide outputs. So if I'm with a C-level partner, they sometimes ask, like, can we have a click dummy? And they don't know even what a click dummy is, right? But that's what they think when they talk with a designer. Yet we are there. As a service designer, we have a seat on the table, and I think it's really important still to show that we play a very relevant strategic role there, and also work with specific outputs. So so that's one thing. The second one is the methodology up front, because many people are not used to double diamond or anything of the processes that we have. It's really important that even like from the first engagement, showing this is how I will do it, and even kind of co-designing that experience or that process with them. And then every time you engage, sort of show where you are in the process and why you did what you do. Over communicating in general is really important. Then we have, and I think this has been mentioned in some of the talks that you had before, but you need to know how to measure impact. This is something I didn't do at the RCA many times. Like the impact was like, hey, but I heard this quote, so this is a really good value proposition of what I'm doing. In consulting, that's not enough. You need to know how to monetize. You need to know how this will create like monetary value to the companies that we're working with, or how you're making savings. Either way, I'm not a business person, but I need to understand their language, and kind of how those decisions are being made. So that's why the multidisciplinary approach is so important, because although you're not going to come up like with the specific numbers, you need to know how these are conceived and how they connect to the overall picture. So it's really important to drive all together towards that common goal. And sometimes you need to make compromises, but in these type of decisions, we as service designers are crucial, because we represent the user. We are the ones who spoke with the users, who study them, who know their pain points, we know their needs, and we need to know if what we know is actually connected to this sort of proposal and yeah, and I said like the numbers of how this business will be conceived in the future. And finally, and then we can now move to the Q&A. I think my kind of key takeaway overall is that I think it's really a great time to be a designer, especially a service designer. And I think of this because of 5 reasons. The first one is that we're dealing today with problems we haven't seen before. I mean, you guys had to pivot already and come up with a digital show, which was like unseen, which I think is kind of fantastic. But that's you need to be. I mean, I think it was a really great outcome because you have that in your blood of kind of pivoting and being fast and coming up with innovative solutions. But I think everyone else, like all companies, all institutions are being today disrupted. This idea of like disrupt or be disrupted faster than ever. The world changed. We are seeing like there's so many issues that need to be tackled. Digitalization is many times one really important factor to consider. And I think designers are in a really excellent position to do that. That's what we do. We think of options, we see the big picture, we see the details, we pivot, we foresee issues. My project at the RCA didn't got implemented, but because we didn't come up with it was a vision, so we didn't come up with the MVP. But I was thinking 2 weeks ago, I saw that for the first time, doctors could prescribe an app to patients. And I thought like, oh, I have to text Maria P, like my partner of the project, because one of the posters that we had there was we had different design provocations, and one was like, what if a doctor would prescribe an app, which is only 3 years ago, but even that was a provocation because that was really not something like we were thinking about 2025. And it's crazy to think like now that's reality. And so change is happening faster than ever. And that's where I think designers are crucial. Secondly, because of COVID specifically, and this idea of Judah was saying last week that we service designers, we are like these party hosts. I think he used that term, I'm not sure. It was a similar one. And now that everything is digital, I feel that the weight on designers is or the workload is even higher, because before you had a physical space where you can engage with people, different roles have different things to do. And today it's all like on the screen. It's all on Miro, for example, is one of the tools that we use. And you need to think of creative ways to engage with the client, and they're like already for 6 hours in Zoom, and you are there to do a workshop. And I think from my experience, designers are the ones that know more about how to do this, how to make it more engaging, and it relies a lot on visuals because it's now everything on the computer. Third, because we are, at least in my type of job, I've been seeing that every time the need to design ecosystems is bigger, so complexity is higher. It's not only like one app for one specific service, but I've seen a strongest required to think like the Deutsche Bahn example I just gave, that okay, this is a starting point of something that is bigger, and this is that is plugged with other services. And service design is also can support in connecting these sort of different complex dots. 4, there are only 5. Like number 4 is I think service design is more known. I think even when I started, that it wasn't that long ago. I mean, 5 years ago, I still had to explain so many times what I was doing and what is service design. And I think very quickly now people know more about what service design is. There are more job offers. There are more. The community has evolved, I think. There's more information online. I mean, everything that you're doing here with this YouTube channel and seeing all these videos is amazing. Many of these things didn't exist before, even less 10 years ago. And finally, I think is, and this is specifically for you because you are at the RCA, and I think the RCA is like a fantastic platform to get to know different practitioners, different people, different partners that you can work with. And I think that's excellent. And probably if you're already there, it's because you're very driven people that were passionate enough to apply and do what you do. So overall, I think it's something to, it's like a great power actually to then graduate and see the different challenges that you can tackle in the future. So those are my thoughts, and that's the end of like my slide presentation. So I'm happy to, maybe if you have some questions or any type of conversation, you can drive it as you like.
Thank you so much, Estefania. That was fantastic. That is just, it reminds me what an amazing journey you had, not only at the RCA, but how far you've come since graduating. And so yeah, thank you so much for that vision into your world as a service designer. I'm expecting to get a few questions through. Mm-hmm. But I was wondering in the meantime, while everyone's kind of like typing them into the chat, if you were to, it's more about looking back on the programme, and now the students that are watching this are here, what kind of things would you recommend that they dial up in certain aspects of service design? Because it is, as you pointed out, it is highly systemic, holistic. It's sometimes very difficult to know where to start. Is there any kind of like advice you might give to the students that are thinking, I think specifically around final projects where you might be focusing on healthcare, but how on earth do you know where to start?
I think it's maybe relates to what we were talking at the beginning of like scope. I think that's really important, and I found it very difficult. I think I did too many projects that maybe I read too much about something, and I think you tend to feel like you need to be the very expert on something to be able to perform and to come up with an outcome. And I sometimes still do it because it's sort of, but you don't need to really. I think you need to kind of know what is relevant and what is not. And so to frame it differently, I think you don't need to kind of learn it all and be like a really expert to come up with a good service. You just need to know how to scope and kind of what are the lenses that you're using to scope your project. And I think that's sort of good enough, because the experts will be the people that you talk to, and it's knowing what to, I guess, and that's even in my practice today. It's really, really easy to get drowned by everything. It's so easy because there are so many things out there, and then you get on internet and I think I remember like Nicolas one time when we did the healthcare one. After a month, he was like, okay, where's the journey? I was like, I don't have a user journey. I'm still learning about healthcare in Denmark. And he was like, no, even if you don't know, you start with some hypotheses and you start like throwing it. And then you go out and speak with people and you see those assumptions, and then you start like bottom up. So I think the scope on knowing how not to get distracted is really, really useful. And then in my professional practice, it's still even so. Like I start with, sometimes I'm working suddenly on insurance, which I don't know anything. I was doing insurance in South Africa 2 months ago. And by Friday, I already had to come up with a strategy on how to come up with different need spaces. And it's like, I don't know anything about this company, but you need to kind of react and be very deliberate on where do you want to put your attention. I think that's the first one. The second one is, I don't think at the end that to me, the need space or kind of what you do or your idea is so important as the execution of your idea and how do you bring it along. Ideas are just things that you can talk with someone. This is the future of the workspace and this and that, but then really focus on kind of if this is your problem statement, then how do you take that into something tangible? How do you provide impact? How you're going to measure that? And I think that's kind of most of the attention, not most of it, but I think it's a part that many times, at least from my experience, and even when we were at the RCA, maybe was underlooked. I think many of us, while we were at the RCA, we did like 70% just research, and then the last weeks doing the 30% of the rest of it. So I think finding a better balance would be my piece of advice.
Fantastic. I'm sure that's resonating with a lot of people watching this right now. And relating to part of that answer, Vridi, I don't know if you want to ask the question in person or whether I should just read it out.
Yes, please turn cameras on.
Do you want to come on camera, Vridi?
No, if you want, if you don't want, it's
maybe
okay
not.
too.
Yeah, I won't force you. Yeah, there she is.
Ah, hi.
You got.
Hi, thank you for the talk. It was very, very inspiring, and thank you for the honesty. I wanted to ask, can you give us a few examples of measuring impact? How did you get to it? How did you understand that that's really important? And how can we implement that early on?
Really good question. I think to me, it depends so much. Every project I have done has been different because you work for different clients with different people with different scopes. So I've never been able to really copy paste like, oh, this is how I measure impact on this one or the other one. However, you can still find ways to, and this is something we do quite often with product managers, and we come up with some key performance indicators. So based on our scope, what we do is, and it's not like a design only thing, many times it also correlates with kind of other practices, but we think of, okay, if by X time, this amount of people do click or they convert, then we are in a good path, you know? And then this is the impact of these numbers on like, we're going to continue, I don't know, selling cars by using this system. If this doesn't convert, then we need to find a different way. So basically you attach one of the kind of key indicators to some decisions that you will take further. So it's not only the data because of the data in itself, but also what is the impact of the results of the information that you will get. I'm always a bit puzzled about like, I mean, not puzzled, but you do need metrics, but I think design specifically also works with intuition. So sometimes you kind of know kind of what needs to be done, you've heard it, and there's like a gut feeling that of things that you want to push further. But in reality, you have decision makers who need the numbers, and you need to understand kind of why would someone invest 2 million to say something on X? I mean, those are the key questions, and that's kind of the things that we're confronted to like very often. And so if you're thinking first of the process, before making in my case, before making a venture, and you're coming up with a value proposition of like, this is the type of venture that you need to do, we do the type of KPIs, or is that maybe we do user surveys. So we come up with many, and then we try to think what type of numbers, if people would use our type of service, how it correlates to their income, or I don't know, depends on the project. So surveys could be good because you can always come up with numbers, and then you know, well, from these 5 ventures ideas, these 2 are the ones that resonated the most, and then we take 2. So from before, we know that by using this survey, we're going to cut down 60% of the scope, because we can't be doing, you know, smart homes and an online bank as 2 ideas at the same time is too time consuming. When you're already in the market, it gets easier because you will have customers and you will have behaviors that you can be kind of constantly measuring. So if you want to kind of take it to specifics of design, you can still also like do surveys or see how many people click on something. We sometimes, or not sometimes, many times we talk about proof of concept, but this is not like a design thing. We do it together with like engineers and with many people because we're seeing a problem in different lenses. And then we say, okay, if we try maybe 2 value propositions and we see how many people click on one, how many people click on this other one, how many people are asking for customer support. So, I mean, maybe I'm rambling a bit, but it's not like we have 1 or 2, but I think in summary, it depends first if you have something that is living or not. That's already like a difference in getting the numbers. 2, this is something that you do with other people. So I haven't, unless you want to test very specific, like qualitative aspects of design. Yeah, I think those are kind of the 2 key points, but that's something fundamental that you're going to be asked from the very beginning.
Thank you.
I think, yeah, it's a very big question, isn't it? It's
a big one, yeah.
Yeah, and very often we talk about with our students, it's not really necessarily trying to understand the problem, but it's like, what is the outcome you're trying to achieve? And if you have a clear idea about what the outcome is, then how can you measure that outcome, whether it's starting with the softer elements to something that are a bit more hardcore. But luckily for the second years, they've got a session with Clive coming up very soon, I think next week, on measuring impact and metrics. So that's good timing. We've got Howard who asked a question. I'm not sure if Howard wants to come on camera to ask your question. It's relating to your final project, but also his final project. Mm-hmm. And here he is.
Hello. I don't know. It's really just a quick question. I'm just wondering if there's any way we can sort of like peek your final project, because it's quite related right now, and a lot of us are actually looking into the health sector because of the COVID, I guess. So is there any way we can, take a look at it?
I used to have a website, but I think it's not online anymore. But I have a description of the project in my website, which is estefaniatrisotti.com. Sounds like advertisement now. But there in my portfolio, I think you might have like there's like an overview of the scope and how it was done. And the other thing we did with Maria P that maybe is interesting to some of you is we had a Medium blog. We did at the beginning, then we ran out of time and we didn't kind of posted it to the end. But at least from I would say the first half of the project, we had like a really good documentation of the trips we did to Denmark, the people we scoped to. So you might find something there that might be linked also from my website.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Great, thanks, Maria P. I mean, not Maria P. Estefania. Actually, Maria P would be somebody good for you to contact as well, Howard. I think she's now working in service design in healthcare in London.
Indeed.
So, yeah. So we can connect you in there. Thanks, Howard. So I think we've dried up on questions. I think, having lunchtime events, that's one thing that it kind of leads to people start getting hungry and brain cells feeding. But we all really appreciate your time. And for sure, we'll be in touch very soon. Hope to see you at our work in progress show in January, which is coming up really fast. And yeah, let's all keep in touch and keep talking.
Yes, definitely. Thank you all for the invitation. And I hope you have a great end of the year and all the best for the shaping your final projects. I think, don't forget, it's a learning experience first. So this is sort of what stays. So I hope you find something you're really excited about. And I'm looking forward to seeing the project at the end.
That's great. It's a nice way to end the talk, end the session. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Have a good day. Bye.
Bye.
See you later.